And, he's still leading worship, so he's doing okay. So God came through for us in a significant way. But that promise was one that we've prayed on for years, even decades. Actually, I adjusted a little bit when we got to his teen years. At 15 or 16, we said, Lord, we believe you're going to give we'll see our children's children, but we're not yet. Just, we're believing that for a few years down the line when the ring's on the fingers and, all that stuff is happening. Now, I have to say, there are not very many things in my life that I have prayed for consistently for years. Right? I don't know about you, but that is not my normal way of living. There's been a couple, but that's probably one of the biggest. And I say it because if you've ever tried that, I know it's hard for me to keep praying for something, either because it's so far in the future I forget about it, or I'm praying for something and it's not happening and you just kind of get discouraged and get tired and kind of let it drift away and you just stop. Right? Some of you have had that experience. I certainly have. It's easy to get discouraged or second guess yourself or just kind of give up and let something go. And Jesus actually talked about that. One of his most well-known teachings about prayer that's often quoted, often wrongly, but that's often quoted, touches on that issue. So I wanted to look at that today. It's out of Matthew chapter 7. Just 4 verses. And we're going to look at it. It'll be familiar to some of you. Jesus said, "Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you'll find. Knock and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives, he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks the door will be open. Which of you, if his son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will give him a snake? If you then, though you're evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him?" And, there's 2 things happening in that passage. The first is an encouragement to keep praying and to keep on praying, to persevere in praying. And soon you know this, but that verb tense where it says ask and you receive, seek is an active tense. A more literal translation would be keep on asking, keep on seeking, keep on knocking. The idea is that it's a command, and it's supposed to become a habit. Like just your continual default way you live is you keep praying for things. You keep bringing them before the Father. And then he goes on and gives a reminder about the Father's heart. So let's look at that. Like I said, it's the idea there of ask, seek, and knock is literally a commitment to a long-term way of doing something. It's not like I'm going to ask a lot just today, but tomorrow and next week and next month and next year, and I'm going after it. I'm going to make it a habit. And then secondly, he says, and whoever asks will receive, and he who seeks finds. It's interesting, that word receive. There's 2 different words for receive in the Greek, the original language that the scripture is written in. This one is lambano. And it's an active word. It means taking something that's available to you. The other word is decamai, and the emphasis there is on just receiving passively. Like the difference, decamai is someone comes up and drops money in your lap, and you just say, "Oh, thank you," and you had nothing to do with it, just like, boom. Lambano, the idea is someone's offering something, and they say, "Oh yeah, you can have it," and you go and take it. And you don't sound like you press through. It's like, oh. Some of you have seen the illustration where, and I've done this before, I didn't have any cash on me, so I couldn't do it today. Held up a $20 bill and it sort of said, "Who wants this?" And a bunch of people raise their hand and say, "Yeah, I want it," and just stand there and say, "Who wants it?" And eventually, someone would get up and come up and take it. That's lambano. That's the idea there. One time I was doing that in a meeting and everybody was familiar with that illustration. So you guess what happened? I held it up before I could say anything. There were like 5 people swarming the stage. One of them, who was in the back, like knocked everybody over, like pressed, like, God! I thought, that's what it means. It literally means, the idea is, I'm not taking no for an answer. And you get in my way, you're bad, because I'm going for it. And it's, you will pay for it. The focus is on the initiative of the receiver. The person receiving, right, asking you to receive, the person receiving is not it's not passive receiving. It's saying, I'm taking it. And it sounds like the opposite. I mean, how do you receive by taking? Well, that's the way it works. The idea is you're praying aggressively. Like, you're not going to take no for an answer. You're going to keep bugging God and convincing God and arguing with God and maybe pleading with God, but whatever you're doing, you're not going to give God a chance to get a breath. And I know some of you are going, but how does that work if God does everything? You know what? I don't know. I just know Jesus said do it. He just said, look, bug me until you get the answer. Don't settle for no. Now, if you're like me, your analytical brain kicks in, and this is a place you just have to turn it off. I'm sorry. I'm really in favor of Christians using their brains and thinking. This is one where you're going to have to just say, you know what? Jesus said it, I'm going to do it. And watch what happens. And if you start doing that, after a while you will hit some questions. Something like, why is this taking so long? You probably had some things you prayed for and didn't get the answer right away, so you did keep praying, and it's like, wait a minute, the days are turning into weeks. It feels like this is going on for years. Why is there no breakthrough? What the heck, Lord? And, I don't know all the answers. Sometimes it takes a while because God is actually moving around pieces like on a chessboard. He's arranging things and getting things because he's actually answering 25 prayers at once, and he's taking it and rearranging it all over the place and combining that and going, okay, it's not just I ask, I receive. There's a whole bunch of other things going on. And I think sometimes God is growing us into the answer. That's worth keeping if you can grab hold of it. It's like God has all these things for us, and if I gave it to you now, it would be like giving the car's keys to a 2-year-old. Giving the keys to your kid can be a tremendous blessing. You give it before they're ready, and it's going to hurt somebody. And sometimes God is saying, no, and the process of praying and wrestling with God and wrestling with your own doubts and fears and challenges, it changes you in the process. But you can't engage with God that way and not come out differently. And sometimes that's what God is doing. He says, yeah, I've got it for you, but you're not ready. But I'm going to help you get ready. So the answer is actually not no, it's just not yet. And He'll grow us into that people. Sometimes it's just a long-term request, like with our son Joshua. It's like, okay, that's not a request I can pray one time and let go. This is something we prayed for, and I remember when our first grandchild was born 27 years later. And I went, God, you're good. And by the way, we're still praying that prayer. It's like, I haven't quit. It's like, okay, children's children. I wonder how many generations I can count that for. So I'm praying for my grandkids at this point. The second thing he says is, as you're doing that, as you're praying and wrestling with what happened and what didn't happen, as you keep going, you need to remember something. In the midst of that, you need to remember who your Father is. Now, why do you think he adds that? I always find it interesting when Jesus says something and follows up with something else. I'm like, okay, these are connected somehow. I think it's really easy to forget who your Father is when you're waiting on an answer that you haven't gotten. And the enemy seems to use that as prime opportunity to distort our picture. If you've ever done that, it's easy to get discouraged, hard to keep on believing. You find yourself going, well, maybe it's not God's will. Maybe it's not in the first place. Or you're being asked questions like, so what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? Why isn't he answering? Did I sin or fail somewhere? I mean, am I just under judgment? Is like, am I in trouble with God and that's why he's not hearing me, he's not answering me? And then you start thinking about all the things you've ever done wrong in your life and you get depressed and you're like, well, clearly God's not going to answer me because look at it, I'm a mess. Well, by the way, that's what qualifies you for an answer, just FYI. Or it just gets boring. I found I only have so many ways to pray for my children's children before I'm saying the same thing again and again and again. It's like I've run out of words, God. I'm not that poetic. I was like, okay, Lord, children's children, come on. I believe it. I'm praying for it. And just praying the same thing over and over after a while, it's like, why am I doing this? Especially if I'm not getting an answer. And sometimes it's, I'm just not that disciplined, frankly. You ask me to do anything every day, it's like, every day? My parents, 26 years, they let me brush my teeth every day, I'm kidding. Some of you going, at 26, you're still, I'm kidding. But you get the idea. It's hard to keep going, and it's in those times we need to remind ourselves that, well, wait a minute, my Father loves me. If I'm asking for a fish, he's not going to say, watch this. Here's a snake, gotcha. Like some perverted pleasure he's going to get from messing with us. That's not who our Father is. Although you have an enemy who'll try and convince you it is. Jesus says, no, remember, he loves you. He has good things for you. He is faithful. He can come in. It brings him joy to give his kids things. If you're a parent, you understand that. Right? As soon as we had kids, Christmas stopped being about what I was getting. It took me a while to get to that place. But the joy on their face when they got something they really loved was much more joy than was in my heart when I got the next tie. And I never got ties, I get socks. But it's either way, it didn't work. But you understand what I'm saying? It wasn't about me. It was the Father going, oh, I love this. It brings me joy to bless my kids. And we have to remind ourselves sometimes, oh yeah, that's who my Father is. If I haven't seen the answer yet, it doesn't mean he's any different than he was yesterday or the day before, or last year, or last decade, or 2,000 years ago. He hasn't changed. He has good things. And Jesus says, now just if you need it to be to drive it home, take a good, honest look at yourself. And here he kind of uses parents as an example. Do you really think you're more loving than I am? Do you really think you love better than God? That you're more kind? That you're more compassionate? That you're more forgiving or more generous than God? Do you really think so? Hint, you're not. He says, but if you get you away from that, if you know how to love your kids, if you take delight in giving things to your kids, how much more is the Father? So he's hitting this like, you know what? Just because you haven't seen it doesn't mean God's not at work. Just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it's not going to. He just drives it home. He's like, just keep on asking. Keep on seeking. I wrote this in my notes. If it's worth really praying about, it's worth praying in persevering. It's worth persevering in prayer. Let's put it that way. That works better. If it's worth praying about, it's probably worth fighting for. Persevering in prayer, contending for, whatever you want. And here's the thing. Jesus said at the end of this sermon that he's giving us the keys for how to build a life that is unshakable when life is shaking, when everything's going crazy so you can stand. And I'll tell you, if you can learn to be someone who keeps on praying when everything around you is going crazy, you will have a different level of unshakability than the people around you. Because it doesn't depend on you and your wisdom and your strength and your courage. No, like, I have learned to connect with the living God. I know how to bring my request to God. I trust Him. I'm doing life from a whole different place. And I don't know anybody who this kind of praying to comes naturally or is easy. It's like a muscle you develop. And you keep doing it. You pray. You keep praying. You keep learning how to pray. If you know anything about like muscle development or weightlifting, you know there's a thing called press to fail. Are you familiar with that? Some of you are. The idea is when you're in the gym, if you're lifting weights and you want to see maximum gains, the reality is they don't come in the first couple times you lift a weight. They come after you get tired and you are stretching and you're pushing to the place that you will fail. Like you can't get it up all the way again. That's actually when your muscles are getting built. And you feel your weakest. You feel tired. You're going like this, hoping someone's there to spot you before the weights go. And the muscles in the fibers in your muscles are actually tearing. But what happens then is when you recover, your muscles build up stronger. It's like that muscle repairs itself and becomes stronger. That's how your muscles grow. And if you want maximum gains, you push to fail. Like you do it until you can't keep going. Well, what if prayer is built the same way? Like you pray and pray and pray until you feel like, I can't do this anymore. I'm done. I'm so tired of it. And then at some point you pick it up and start going again and you don't realize, oh, you're actually a lot stronger this time than you were. And if you've ever done that in the gym, I promise you, when you walked out afterwards, you did not feel strong. You felt tired and sore. And depending on how many reps you did, you might have felt very discouraged. Like, I'm failing after 2 reps. Like, oh my gosh. But if you keep it up over time, you'll be lifting a lot more weight, a lot more. It's the same thing spiritually. Same principle applies. You push to fail, you keep going. And when you hit fail, all it means is you've hit your current limit. But what's happening is you're building your limit, you're increasing your limit. So that when you hit that in 6 months or a year or 2 years, what used to be hard is the easy. It becomes the warm-up. Learn to pray like this, and you will be unshakable. Life will not overwhelm you. Now, I said this, and we changed the order. Usually we do baby dedications first. I wanted to change the order because, practically speaking, I think for many of us, one of the easiest or most common areas we persevere in is once you have kids, you're praying for them. And your motivation is at a whole different level than almost anything else. Whether they're just going through something in the moment, or you're praying for their salvation and walk with God, or their spouse, or a job, whatever, there's a different kind of motivation there. You know, it's like, oh, I can't pray that much for me, but I'll pray for them. And the families who are going to come up, have come up here, part of the parents' charge or responsibility is to become prayers for their kids. And one of the things that we can do as a congregation to support them and support parents in general is be praying for them and their kids. And do it ongoing. Like, not just 5 seconds here or there. So it's a vivid example of, oh, okay, I'm going to be praying for this. So let me shift gears and talk a little bit about that. We don't know a lot about Jesus' life before his ministry started. We have stories about how he was born, his miraculous birth, and then just a couple stories up until he's ready to start his ministry at 30, when he gets baptized and launches his ministry. And there's really only 2 scenes, there's probably 2 or 3, after his birth that are mentioned. One is when the wise men come and give gifts, which was probably a few months after his birth, not immediately. And he has one moment where he's a young boy of, doesn't say how old, but old enough that he goes in the temple and starts impressing all the spiritual leaders with his level of understanding. And freaks his parents out because they don't know where he is and can't find him. And the other one is when he is presented to the Lord. And this is what I'm talking about. We use the word dedication, the biblical term to be presented. Baptism is when an adult who's decided to follow Jesus makes a public statement. It's a public statement that I am following Jesus now. And going under the water and coming back up is symbolic of an old life ending, where they live for themselves, and a new life beginning where they are led by Jesus, living for Him as their Lord, having received His offer of forgiveness and salvation. But biblically, that's something that happened after someone made a commitment to follow Jesus. It might happen in 5 minutes afterwards, it might happen later, but it was afterwards because it was a conscious decision that the adult made. That doesn't work for children. Right? They aren't of an age to make that decision yet. So the picture you've got in Scripture is outlined in Luke 2. It says this: on the 8th day, when it was time to circumcise us, he was named Jesus, the name the angel had given him before he had been conceived. When the time came, Joseph and Mary took him to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord. Okay, and then he goes and circumcised and is presented. Now his parents are doing that for him. He's got no say in the matter. Right? You realize that. At 8 days, he's not saying much of anything. His parents are doing it. And what you get is the parents it's actually a parental commitment. Like the parents are making a commitment, like how they're going to parent this child, but they're also making a faith statement on behalf of their child. Makes sense? It's like they get to speak for him. In the Old Testament, you see a story of Hannah, who was the mother of Samuel, who she prayed for a baby. God, when she was older, finally gave her a child. She said, "Oh, Lord, I'm giving him to you. I'm presenting this child. This child is yours for you. He will live for you. I recognize he's from you," etc. And in 1 Corinthians 7, there's an interesting passage. Actually, I'll read it for you. That captures this idea. And we need to understand that if you're a believing parent, that's good news for your kid. Paul is giving some instructions here about marriage and divorce and remarriage and how that plays out, but specifically talks about the kids. So he says, if any brother has a wife who's not a believer and she's willing to live with him, he should divorce her. And if a woman has a husband who's not a believer and he's willing to live with her, she shouldn't divorce him. For the unbelieving husband has been sanctified through his wife, and the unbelieving wife has been sanctified through her believing husband. Otherwise, your children would be unclean. But as it is, they are holy. And the point of that is that when you're a believer, the people that are connected to you by marriage or birth get the benefit of that. Okay? If you have a spouse who's not following, there's actually a reality that they will get benefit. To a certain degree, the Lord will treat them as if they were believers because your son or daughtership overflows to them. Likewise to your children. God will treat your children as believers. They are holy because they came from a believing parent. And so there's a blessing on them. In that sense, the parent represents the child. What God has given to or for the parent gets overflowed to the kid. Hope I said that in a way that makes sense. And so in the parents coming and presenting their child to the Lord, they're speaking for the child. It's like almost a prophetic statement. Like, I'm speaking for him. He or she can't speak for themselves yet. I'm speaking for them. Lord, I'm yours. Now, the time will come they have to confirm, they have to make their own decision. And they'll get baptized or not. But as a child, before that, it's the parent's job to recognize, hey, this child is a gift from God, and I'm saying he or she is going to live for you. The last thing I'll say is, they had to take Jesus to Jerusalem because the dedications, like baptisms, were normally performed publicly because it was a community thing. It wasn't just a private thing or just a personal family thing. It's like, no, this is actually the kid's entrance into the community. And the community is saying, basically, hey, you're part of us. And you may not know the child personally or not, you may not be close to the family or not, but you're part of the same body. You're connected by being part of the same community. In the sense that we have the gift of that child and the responsibility towards that child. Doesn't mean you have equal responsibility with your parents to raise them, but to encourage, to comfort, to pray for, to minister to as you have opportunity. So, part of what we're doing is for the family, part of it's for the rest of us. To say, okay, you don't do this walk with God alone. You're part of a body, you're part of a community. And we're supposed to be serious about that. Right? You've heard me say it often. This is not a meeting that we all go to. This is a family gathering. Right? If you're new here, my hope and prayer is that you connect with the family at deeper and deeper levels as you go. Okay? So, with that said, we're going to be presenting 3 kids today. So if I could have those families come up. I say that until we're headed out the back door. Here we go. So, well, Haiti and Sarah. Yeah, come up here in front of everybody. Everybody gets to see you. So the way we do this is this. I'm going to give each of them an opportunity to share a little bit about why they're here. Then I'm going to ask them some questions to speak for commitments that they will make. And then what we're going to do, what we've done in the past is stand off and I'll hold the baby and pray over the baby. And we're going to do it differently today because I really feel sort of convicted about the importance of this being a community thing. So after they share, I'm going to let them step down off the stage and invite you to come and pray over the kids. Pray blessings, give prophetic words and words of encouragement if you get them, whatever you get, and just wear them out. Just exhaust them. Just make them really tired standing there as their kid gets blessed. Because I'm sure they'll get resentful after a while. Probably not. Okay. So, makes sense, and we'll open up for some other ministry time for other things as well. So, you want to